Welcome to the Flickcast, the podcast about stuff nerds love. I'm Joe Dilworth, your usual co-host. This week, we're going a little different. This is the, I guess you could call this the Dilworth cut of the Flickcast, as Chris Ulrich, my usual co-host, is on special covert, super secret assignment. However, we're not going to leave you listening to just me droning on and on and on. So I want to welcome back to the show, friend of the Flickcast, Rick Marshall. Rick, how are you?
Great. You know, we're as good as things can be with everything going on around us right now, but it is wonderful to be back.
Excellent. Fantastic. So just for those of you that have maybe missed hearing Rick, he's been on a couple times, and so if you've missed listening to him, Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and what you have going on?
Well, I am a freelance writer, but I basically cover entertainment for years now, and I've been on a track that took me through, newspapers, then to Wizard Magazine for many years, and then through MTV and IFC and Movies.com and Fandango, and now I am currently a contributing editor at Digital Trends, writing about movies and television and streaming and all that sort of fun stuff. I'm a professional geek, basically.
Fantastic. Well, that's excellent. Well, certainly over the last year, I'm sure you've had many digital trends to write about in the entertainment industry, so probably no lack of coming up with articles for the last year. So that's pretty great.
No, not at all.
Speaking of, how we consume things now, streaming is obviously the way to go. And we have a few things that are streaming that fans and us as well. And I know Chris, we'll have to hear about it next week from you. But there are a couple things that started this week that we have been anticipating greatly. One of those is, of course, the Snyder Cut of Justice League. And we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to dive right into The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You know what? That title messes me up every time. I want to call it, and then now I'm showing my age, I want to call it The Falcon and the Snowman. The classic spy movie. I don't know if you've seen that, Rick.
That is definitely a slip up that is only going to be appreciated by a certain demographic of listener, because I totally understand where you're coming from. But if I made that joke to a wide swath of people, they would not get it.
Oh yeah. I made that joke to a couple coworkers, and they're like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" I'm like,
Yeah, there's definitely like the and the sort of genre of titles.
Yes.
And The Falcon and the Snowman is one of them, but not one of the best known.
No, it's true, and it's a movie that I greatly like. I haven't watched it in years, and this is making me want to. But yeah, that's my constant slip up. So, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. See, I got through that okay. So, episode 1 dropped on Disney Plus this week, and so did you get a chance to watch it, Rick? And if so, what do you think?
I did. I think it was a very good show, very good first episode, but it's a bit weird because coming off of WandaVision, there's a certain sort of expectation that I think a lot of fans and audiences have, that there's going to be, these mysteries and these questions and things that you can sort of, talk about over the water cooler, I guess in this case, the virtual water cooler in many ways. And this is a much more straightforward show. It's a very straightforward sort of espionage action buddy sort of show where, it doesn't have the sort of lingering mysteries that I think really propelled the conversation around WandaVision.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I was wondering if that was going to impact people's perception of the show, because boy, did people pull apart and pour over WandaVision every single week and in minute detail. And I don't know that necessarily this show lends itself to it. I like it a lot, though. I've always been a fan of the fact that even though, we've had 20-some movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and now a bunch of TV shows, each thing, like, each Captain America movie, the Thor movies and all that, they all seem to have their own tone. So to me, if you're coming in and you're a Marvel fan and you're expecting, this show to be kind of the, mystery in a box, same thing as WandaVision, you haven't been paying attention. And, if you're a casual fan, I still think it's something for you. And hopefully, this, they're making a big deal about this is going to set up a bunch of stuff. And I think that was kind of the trap for our WandaVision, was that, this is going to, I think, it was kind of casually mentioned ahead of time, this will feed into a couple things. So people were expecting way too much of WandaVision that they were never told was going to be there. So having the disappointment over things that I thought should be there that weren't is, the perennial problem with fandom. But I think WandaVision got hit hard with it. So I'm hoping that Falcon and the Winter Soldier can kind of avoid that, and people can appreciate it and enjoy it for what it is. But, we'll see.
And I think, WandaVision sort of fell into that trap of, these shows like Lost or things like that, where once there's, once mystery is a foundational element of the story, and not knowing what's going on is sort of a foundational element of what's happening, then it just lends itself to so much more speculation and trying to piece out what every single little thing represents and the greater meaning for everything, where, it fell victim to that because they sort of had a more straightforward sort of ending to the whole thing. But I did think it set up a lot. I think WandaVision set up a lot. With this show, with Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think that this show is going to show us what the status quo in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, like where things are really at, because we only got a very encapsulated version of where things were at. I guess sometimes literally an encapsulated version of it in WandaVision. And this one really seems to be sort of looking at the international sort of ramifications of the blip and what happened. I love in the first episode that conversation about how people's finances were affected by the blip. Like when they've been gone for 5 years and have no income for 5 years, they can't get loans to fix up this thing or that thing, and all of these issues where like, well, how do you make money? How do the Avengers make money? And all these little things that sort of showed the massive implications of people being gone, just disappearing for 5 years and coming back.
I greatly enjoyed that because even amongst my friends at the time after Endgame, a few people complained about, well, everyone's back now, and they didn't really deal with, the ramifications of that. And I'm like, well, that's not really what Endgame was about. That wasn't the point of it. So I do like the fact that they're taking time, even more so in Falcon and Winter Soldier, that here's a lot of the, fallback. Once the joy and the happiness of having, people back wears off, then there's a lot of real world stuff that comes into play, like you said. And I'm pleased that they're doing that. They kind of touched on that briefly, in WandaVision with Monica Rambeau coming back. And that was more of a singular kind of story. This is like, here's what this means for the world. Here's some good examples. So I kind of like that. I mean, I'm not huge on things like this leading to people going, well, yeah, but in the real world it wouldn't work that way. So that whole thing falls apart for me. And I'm like, it's not the real world though. It's a fictionalized version of the real world. So yeah, it's going to get real to a certain extent, but some of it is going to be hand wavy and some of it's going to be, explained off. So let's not get too caught up in the details, but it's good to see, hey, listen, this had an impact, right? So
yeah, I like that they're just sort of acknowledging that this happened and that there are implications. And I also just have really enjoyed in the first episode the continued sort of presence of some of the characters, these sort of supporting and minor characters that I kind of love. The fact that they made Batroc, the Leaper, a legitimate threat. Like, I love that they have, Georges St. Pierre there, the MMA guy playing him, and he looks legit as him. And suddenly, now this guy has, battled Captain America and Falcon to a somewhat standstill in cases, and suddenly Batroc is a big deal. I love that about the Marvel universe in the screen, and I'm really looking forward to the introduction of Zemo, who is one of my favorite characters in the comics universe. And early reports, and everything has been confirmed that he's coming back for this show, and I kind of love that because I really want to see how they sort of build out that character and that villain in this show, and it's looking really cool. I'm really excited about it. The first episode got me really excited about it. There were some surprises. I didn't expect some of the things that happened in it to happen. And I didn't expect the new Captain America to be introduced that quickly, and I think that's really cool. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that and how they sort of come to terms with that when it comes to Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah, that part I'm really interested in. Firstly, because the actor playing him, Wyatt Russell, is Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn's kid. So I'm interested to see. I don't think he's got a little bit of a resume, and I haven't really seen anything of his.
I just saw him in Overlord. I actually just finally watched Overlord. I've been meaning to for a long time. I finally watched it a few weeks ago, and he was good in Overlord. He's not like a major. He's one of the main characters in it, but he was good in Overlord. But this is really the first thing where I think we're going to see more of his sort of personality and range in it.
Yeah, so I'm very interested to see what they do with that character, because apparently it's John Walker, who, if everyone who's read the comics knows, becomes U.S. agent, and started out as kind of a bad guy, an adversary for Captain America before taking on the mantle of Captain America for a short period of time, and then kind of becoming his own character, although he never was kind of mentally stable.
No. He started out as I think it was some guy called Super Patriot, and then eventually became U.S. agent. And he's always been this sort of, jingo sort of fueled, like ultra nationalist, ultra aggressive sort of like, super rah-rah patriot guy that, will follow the orders and above all else. And it's going to be interesting to see that sort of juxtaposition with Sam Wilson and Bucky there, because they have had to sort of deal with their own moments of, okay, I need to sort of go my own way on this, and that's not part of John Walker's sort of skill set as he was in the comics.
Well, I just hope at the end of it, much like WandaVision, that folks watch this for the story that they're telling and not. I mean, the purpose of these shows, yes, it has been said that they'll feed back and forth with the movies and TV shows, but the point of the show isn't to see how many things we can set up and how many things we can, lost. I think people that's a show I have a huge amount of affection for, and we need to just do a podcast one day just talking about that. But you're right.
Love that show.
Yeah, you're right. I think it got caught up in the mystery of it, and that, much like The Walking Dead, that's kind of my problem with The Walking Dead, is that it seems like the only reason people watch The Walking Dead to see who's going to get killed off, and that's not the point of the show. It's not to kill off characters. It's to tell a story about how this affects people and what they do and how they're going to get through this. Same thing with Lost. It was about the characters at the end of the day. It had a beginning, middle, and end, a satisfactory story about these characters and what they did and how they connected. And that's the point of it. It wasn't what's the smoke monster. It wasn't what's down the hatch. Those are nice little set dressing, if you would, to me. Same thing with WandaVision. The point of it is Reed Richards going to be in here. How's she going to bring the mutants back? How is it going to feed into Doctor Strange 2? It's like, that's, to me, the extras. The point of the story was Wanda dealing with his grief and what, Agatha tried to do to manipulate it. Same thing with Falcon and Winter Soldier. It isn't going to be, how many things is this going to feed into? And does that mean that character, he has this name Bruce? Does that mean he's connected to, Bruce Banner in some way or whatever? It's this story about Bucky and Sam and dealing with what they're dealing with. And I thought they set that up nicely in the first episode. So anyway, that's my rant for the episode,
Yeah, no, I feel similarly about it. And I think that WandaVision did a good job of setting up the things that it set out to set up. I mean, it gave a new sort of status quo for Wanda herself, and it sort of created a way to bring Vision back and have Vision still in the MCU. And I think that just those alone are a really big deal, and I think that they deserve some appreciation there that it figured out a way to have both of those things make sense and be in there.
Yeah.
And that's enough, I think.
Absolutely, I agree. So yeah, no, Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're one episode in, strong beginning. Definitely tuning in for the next 5 episodes, and we'll see how it goes. Now, though, all right, so we're going to switch from Marvel to DC because I'm really, really itching to talk about this. The much anticipated. You know what? I was. We're talking, of course, about Zack Snyder's Justice League. I was speaking of. We were talking pre-show about how my perception of time has gone out the window. I was surprised to be reminded that the first Whedon version of Justice League came out 4 years ago. It's been 4 years.
That's wild.
Yeah, and Cavill's been playing Superman since 2013, which is insane. I mean, that's like, what is going on with time? But all right, we'll just jump into it. Let's start with the obvious question, Rick. What did you think?
Against all expectations and desires, maybe, I guess, I really liked it, and I was not expecting to. I am sort of in that camp of people who everyone expected not to like it, not to want it. I mean, I'm on record as saying I don't think there was a point in making it, because as background, I'm a fan of Zack Snyder's films outside of the DCEU, the extended universe there. I hated Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. I hated them, but I really liked his prior films, and I really disliked Justice League, and so it never made the 2017 one, and I never saw any point in sort of pouring all of that money into a revised version of a film I already didn't like by a director whose previous films in this area I haven't liked. And then on top of everything else, I've been sort of targeted a lot. I've gotten a lot of harassment from the Snyder Cut crowd in the past. Like, I got some really, Chris and I have talked about this, I think in the previous episode I was in, I got some really, really bad messaging and feedback and harassment from the Snyder Cut crowd over the years. Anytime I basically said anything negative about Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, or mentioned that I really wasn't that interested in seeing the revised version of Justice League, I was getting like messages of the "go kill yourself" variety, not just normal like feedback, but to the point where there were Twitter accounts that I actually reported and ended up being locked down or blocked, which doesn't happen that often.
Right.
Wow. And I got a lot of harassment for that, and so coming into Justice League, I was very skeptical of it, and I sat down and I watched it in 2 parts, 2 hours one night and 2 hours the next night, and midway through, after that first night of watching, I realized to myself, I'm actually looking forward to this second half of this. Wait a minute, do I actually like this? I think I do. And after it was done, I realized that I really, really liked the film. Right up until the epilogue. I hated the epilogue to it, but I loved the main film. I'm as surprised as anyone by that.
Well, no one would blame you then if you would have just said, yeah, I'm not even going to watch it. I don't really care. So good on you for saying, listen, I'll check this thing out and see what all of this has been about over the years. Wow. That's, I just don't.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where I came into it with a lot of baggage, and it was sort of weird. I literally started out my review for Digital Trends that I had written as being how does one review this fairly? It's such a weird, unique project. Do you review it by comparing it to the 2017 film and what's different? Do you have to review it sort of in a vacuum as a standalone film? It has so much baggage, and a reviewer, I have baggage coming in, and so how do you do this? But in the end, I realized that I just really, really liked it, and it did certain things so much better than the 2017 film, and it really sort of felt like it's a completely new movie to me, which was the biggest surprise for me of the entire thing, is that it felt like a completely new movie. I thought that it was just going to feel like the 2017 movie just with some deleted scenes thrown in and and a fresh coat of paint on some stuff. But
right.
it felt different, a completely different tone, and in many cases, completely different story than the 2017 one. And I can't believe that I've been out here telling people, yeah, you should check it out. Actually, it's worth checking out because it's a totally new movie. Even if you didn't like the 2017 one, you should probably check this out because you might end up liking this one, and as I did, and I was the least likely to do so.
Wow. Yeah. No. Obviously. So I just don't get fans anyway. So my initial reaction to it. So I am a fan of Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman. I really, really like them. And I haven't gotten quite the vitriol that you've gotten, but I've gotten a lot of, you're an idiot. How can you like that? And I just unabashedly loved both of them. I'm also a Zack Snyder fan. I'm Zack Snyder fan in the same way that I'm a Michael Bay fan. That despite whatever opinion the general audience may have about his movies, specifically Zack Snyder I'm talking about now, is to me, he knows how to construct a movie and make it visually appealing, but also construct a story well. Even if you don't agree with the story, even if you don't agree with the choices in the story, or even like the story to begin with, to me, he's just a really good, really great, in some ways, filmmaker. So
he's just one of those filmmakers, too, though, that has a very specific style. And if you like that style, you will like a lot of what he does. And that's why I find it weird that I really disliked Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. And I think my issues with Man of Steel I think also come from the fact that it was, for me, it was not a Superman story. And I feel like that was, it's sort of taking a character and telling a whole different story with it that doesn't feel in keeping with the character. And I think that was it for me, at least. And that was just my sort of vibe on it. And I just didn't like some of the story choices that he made. Didn't vibe with the movie for me. And Batman v Superman I thought was kind of a mess and disjointed. Those are my issues with it. However, I loved his previous films, like 300, Dawn of the Dead. And you know what? I'm that reviewer who really liked Sucker Punch. Like I really enjoyed Sucker Punch.
Me too. Yes.
And, well, then we're the only people in the world, it seems, because I take a lot of heat for that. And I thought Sucker Punch was exactly the movie that I wanted it to be.
Well, so I think with I definitely hear what you're saying about Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, because my opinion of it is that with Superman and Batman, you have 80 plus years of comic book stories, plus radio shows, plus previous TV shows, plus previous movies. And you have all these iterations of both of the characters that any Superman or Batman movie that comes out is never going to hit 100% with all the fans. It's just not going to happen. And I think, and what I appreciated about Zack Snyder is he didn't try to make a Batman and Superman movie that appealed to the general fans. He made the movie that he always wanted to see, picking bits and pieces from, being a lifelong comic book fan. I can see the comic book stories and storylines that he pulled some of the stuff from. So he took some of his favorite stuff, made his Superman movie, made his Batman versus Superman team-up movie, and went with it. So I applaud him for that. But I totally get that it's not going to hit with everybody. And there are people, of a certain age, even, I think probably the younger people are more like, yeah, this is just kind of like how movies are made. But I think, people, much like with Star Trek fans, Star Wars fans, there are people that are very protective of the thing they love, and they love it for very specific reasons, and they want to see more of that. And when they don't get that, then whatever product that's labeled with the name of the thing they love is, in their mind, this is terrible. And I get that. I don't agree with that kind of perception of it, but that's just me. So, I go into all of these with really like, yeah, sure. I mean, I can't help but have what I want to see happen. But to me, again, this is their story. This is what they're trying to tell. I'm interested to see it. In this case, Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, I'm like, I'm really digging this version of it. So, going into Zack Snyder's Justice League, I was looking at it from, because I did watch both those previous two movies earlier in the week in preparation. So I went in and, not only looking at, in a few ways, what different is this going to be from the previous Justice League? How is this as a Zack Snyder movie? Because the previous one, even though he got sole directing credit, that was not a Zack Snyder movie. And how does it work in context with the previous two movies, as this was originally intended to be the third, in a trilogy kind of. So from all to me, it just nailed it across the board with all three of those. It in my opinion, justified Zack Snyder's storytelling choices in the previous two movies, but also that he's a better filmmaker than Joss Whedon and knew his story better than anybody else trying to come in and change it. Again, like I said,
it was extremely enlightening to see that. What you just mentioned, to be honest, was that I remember in my review of the 2017 film, I talked about the fact that I'm like, I really like some of the humor that was very Whedon-like humor that's in the movie, and it really kind of, elevates it out of, sort of the doldrums that I think that these Snyder portions were sort of mired in. But now watching Zack Snyder's Justice League, what I realized was that, to be honest, that was part of maybe something that I didn't like about that. In retrospect now, maybe something I didn't like about it was the fact that having those Whedon elements in just didn't vibe with the Snyder sort of aesthetic and tone that was in it. And that may have been some of the reasons for my dislike for it. Because now when I see this movie with the very consistent tone throughout, it's very Zack Snyder tone throughout, I realized that, this works for it. Like the comedy that he put in is what works for this movie. The aesthetic and the beats that he had planned for it are what work within this tone, and it makes it feel consistent rather than sort of, having this one super funny, campy element, which then makes the sort of darker elements feel that significantly darker and significantly slower and really much more of a downbeat. Where when it's sort of a consistent theme throughout, it doesn't feel as dire and as mired in its own angst as as previous ones had felt for me, to be honest. And it's weird because I know that Batman v Superman was also a very Snyder movie, but I just didn't like that one. The story felt very disjointed to me and very nonsensical. And this one, I feel like everything that was happening in it, I could understand and felt more sort of cohesive. And that may just be because he had to edit things down too in Batman v Superman and sort of didn't have those constraints in this Justice League. He could make his 4-hour plus movie and didn't need to worry about fitting it into a normal theatrical time. So now I wonder how much of Batman v Superman might have been cut out, that would have made me possibly like it more. Who knows? And I've always thought that Henry Cavill was a fantastic Superman.
Oh yeah.
Even though despite disliking those movies, I always wanted to see him in a different sort of film. I would love to see him under maybe a different director or things like that, because I think he is a really good Superman.
I'm a big fan of writing for characters and being able to tell, a complete character story within a movie or a series of movies. So for me, especially Superman in this one, there was just a ton of payoff. I literally got chills and got a little emotional, and spoilers, by the way, for people that haven't, I'm sure everybody's seen it already, but spoilers if you haven't watched it, we're going to get into some details. But the scene towards the, when Superman comes back and he's trying to figure himself out, when he's walking through the Kryptonian ship and you hear the dialogue from his two dads, from Jor-El and Jonathan Kent, that's juxtaposed together. Well, not juxtaposed, they fit together. And it's dialogue from Man of Steel, and just hearing this like complete conversation, it's like, man, he planned that back when he did Man of Steel. He had to, because the dialogue just fit together so well. And he's, Superman trying to reconcile this fact that he's from outer space and he's trying to be human on Earth, and hearing both sides give him the same advice of, you need to protect humanity. This is what you're here for. Just, to me, completely paid off. Man of Steel,
Well,
Batman versus Superman was beautiful. It was a beautiful scene.
Well, this was probably the first of those three films where I felt like Henry Cavill's Superman actually enjoyed being Superman.
Right.
And that might seem weird to me, I don't know, but that was one of my complaints too in the first two films there with him, was that it always felt like a real pain for him to be Superman. Like he was always just hated having to be Superman or being Superman. And this movie, after he sort of figures things out and comes back and sort of, rejoins the rest of the team, it was the first time in all three films where I felt like suddenly Superman liked being Superman and realized, and it wasn't just a bummer for him to be Superman, and he was kind of happy to be it and happy to be a hero and got enjoyment out of it rather than constant angst and stress out of being a hero. And that's what I kind of liked about this Justice League, was the heroes felt more like the heroes that the archetypes for each of them that we've sort of been trained to to sort of relate to for each of those characters. And that's what I really liked about this one. They all felt like the characters they were supposed to be, and that if you're going to use these characters, you probably should hew somewhat close to. And that's what I liked about this one.
Well, and so to me, that was, the payoff of the other two movies is I think we got a complete, or at least the next stage of, Superman and Batman from the previous two movies. We got some nice, satisfactory story points from, Wonder Woman coming off of her solo movie. There was a lot of things that paid off from that. And then we had, several new characters, obviously. And I felt with this one, they finally actually got some time. We got to understand. I mean, again, being a lifelong comic book fan, I knew what these characters were about. But for, the context of the story of the movie, I felt like that they got kind of, being teased in Batman versus Superman. They got short shrift in the previous Justice League, just like, oh, here's Barry Allen, here's what he can do, let's go on. Oh, here's Aquaman, here's what he can do, let's move on. And same thing with Cyborg. And this one, they got more room to breathe, and we got to really more understand them and get where they're coming from, so that when they, do decide that, yep, we're going to go in and beat the bad guy no matter what it takes, you have kind of, you get what they're sacrificing, you get what this means for them, and that felt much more impactful. Even surprisingly, I thought Steppenwolf was much better developed in this one. He wasn't just this raving, I'm going to destroy the earth bad guy. There was actually a purpose and a point to what he was doing, and there were times where you almost kind of felt bad for him, because it's like, oh man, I really enjoyed
the work they did on his character in this one. It's interesting, actually, just this at some point today, I don't know if it's up now or not, I interviewed the Weta Digital about the visual effects studio about their work on Justice League. And nice. I believe the article is up either today, at some point today, on Digital Trends. And they worked extensively on Steppenwolf. And that was one of the questions I talked, one of the topics I talked to them about was, sort of refreshing Steppenwolf. And it was really, really interesting to talk to them about that, because these were the original design. This was the original design for Steppenwolf and what was teased in Batman v Superman. And then in the 2017 film, they had to do a lot of work to sort of make Steppenwolf not that and into what we saw in Batman v Superman. And I didn't realize until talking with them how much work they had to do to get off of that. And then now, for this cut, to then revert back to the original plan for Steppenwolf. And it's clearly a much better version. It's much more alien, much more aggressive, much more also just layered, like his interactions with Darkseid, who was also just amazingly well done in this.
Yes.
It's there's a lot that went into that, and sort of his rippling armor, Steppenwolf's rippling armor in it. And so much work was done to sort of get back to the Steppenwolf that they had planned from the start to do. Yes. That was all very surprising to me. It went along. That was sort of symptomatic of a lot of the surprises I had in talking with the people involved with this film, was how much stuff was actually left on the cutting room floor and changed from when Zack Snyder left the project. I was always skeptical because I'm like, what studio would actually just cut that much footage from, from a movie like this that costs this much money just in reshoots and things like that? I mean, when he's saying that, like, there's all this footage on there, he can't really mean that. And then talking to the visual effects studio and also, watching the movie and hearing, what Snyder has had to say about it, they were right. Like, there really was that much material left over, and for them to have to now revert it back, like with things like Steppenwolf and all of that, is just like phenomenally interesting to me in such a weird, unique position.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Jack Kirby's Fourth World, so getting to see Steppenwolf and Darkseid and Desaad and mother boxes and boom tubes and all this stuff in live action, I was just like, I want to see Zack Snyder do a Fourth World movie now, because it's like
that final shot of Darkseid staring out at Darkseid with Apocalypse behind him, staring out at Superman and the rest of the Justice League there. That was beautiful. Like, that was a thing of beauty right there. And that's the one that sold me. I'm like, I love this movie. This is a really, really good movie. I like this film. Unfortunately, I thought the epilogue to the film sort of then took away some of the luster, because I really did not like sort of all of the extra stuff that was in the epilogue of Zack Snyder's Justice League here. But I really loved everything preceding that. I was really impressed by it. And like you said, the extra attention that Cyborg and Flash got in this was so well deserved and so well done. I felt like invested in Cyborg that I really wasn't in the 2017 movie. Like, Cyborg was a really tragic figure, that sort of figure he's supposed to be, and Flash really was great in the scenes. The extra scenes that were in this one really sort of added to that character and made him even more fully fleshed out.
Yeah. No, I actually did like the epilogue, because, I mean, again, being a comic book fan, there is always like those tags at the end of a comic book that shows, 20 years from now, and it's like, what? Batman's working with Deathstroke and the Joker, and what the hell's going on here, kind of thing. And obviously it pays off in the next issue or a miniseries or whatever event. You get to see all this payoff, and I'm very much a sucker for alternate universes and alternate futures, and we've got to fix the future and we got to make this not happen. I'm a sucker for those kind of stories. So I was like, oh, this epilogue is awesome. My biggest was, we're never going to see it pay off. So
yeah, that's a bummer. After seeing that shot of, like I said, that shot of Darkseid and Apocalypse and all of that, like that was that's a tragedy to see, because not having the payoff of that scene in particular really is disappointing. But I mean, I don't know what in this case, I'm not sure what was going on at Warner Brothers during all of this. There's been so many stories written about it. There's so many angles to take on it, and it's such a fascinating sort of story, because clearly there was a really good movie that they started out with and he wanted to make, and despite anything might have come before and the controversies of things that came before, this is clearly a really good idea, and some good plans were in works there that just got totally loused up and just kept throwing more money after the money that was already invested, and it's just wild.
I think it's obvious that Warner Brothers got cold feet at some point about how far they were going to let Zack Snyder push things and continue his story. And then, I think they probably used, again, not in the room and don't know all the people involved, but it seems like they used the excuse of him stepping aside, unfortunately, to be like, yeah, I think we're going to redo things. And I think they listened too much to the backlash from Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. They were like, there's a vocal minority on the internet downplaying these, and we're pissing off the fans, apparently, so we should rethink this whole thing. And I think that's a tragedy, because this movie, to me, proved that the DC EU extended universe was going in a very interesting and different way. And I just, like I said, my biggest disappointment from watching this is that we'll never see those things pay off that were set up at the end of this. And I think it would have made it great, Justice League 2 and Justice League 3, and we could have had, solo movies from all the characters as was originally intended, in between, and it would have been something special in my opinion, in the same way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was or is, but it would have been different. I think the biggest sin, if you want to call it, of the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League is he tried to make another Avengers movie, and it's like, don't try to catch lightning in a bottle again. Carry the tone and do something different. And I think it's apparent that's what Zack Snyder was wanting to do. He's like, I don't want to mimic what they're doing. I get what they're doing, and I get the idea of bringing all these characters together, but I want to do it in a different way. And I'm sad we won't get to see how that would have panned out, but
Well, what's interesting to me too, though, is that as I mentioned, one of my, things the problems I had with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman is just, for me, they just didn't jive with the characters. They didn't do the characters justice. They also just didn't fit with the characters. It felt like they were, for me, it felt in times that they were trying to shoehorn these well-known characters into stories that didn't fit them. Where in Justice League, in Zack Snyder's Justice League, in the Snyder Cut here, this actually felt more true to these characters than Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. And I thought that was really interesting because I feel like somewhere along the line he found the characters, and maybe those other two films just he hadn't gotten there yet with it, or I don't know if he had it planned all along or what, but these felt the most true to the main characters of all of the prior ones. This felt more like Superman to me. This movie felt more like Superman. This movie felt more like Batman. This movie felt right to Cyborg and to Flash and those characters that hadn't gotten their own solo films. This felt more true to the characters that we know and love than Man of Steel and Batman v Superman to me. And I think that's what's interesting is that, like, people talk about, we should have let Zack Snyder go his own way. He wanted to do something different. But he did something different, in my perspective, in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. And I wasn't a huge fan of those. And this movie felt like it was getting back to what the characters were best known for and what we're familiar with in them, more so than those previous two films, and it seems to be doing very well. So it's a weird, I guess it's everybody's different perspective on it.
I would agree with you on that last point, but from a different perspective. I don't think it's that Zack Snyder didn't know what he wanted to do with the characters or what he intended. I think the characters themselves, he was writing them and showing them in a way that, in the case of Superman, he didn't know, and the payoff was, in this movie, he becomes the Superman that everybody knows. He had to go through all that other stuff. Same thing with Batman. He had gone so far, left and astray from what he was and what he symbolized. I mean, they had those discussions with Alfred, even in Batman versus Superman. And this movie and the death of Superman led him to the point of getting back to what he was and realizing, no, we need to be that. I don't need to be this thing that I've become. Kind of same thing with Superman. I need to be this thing. I don't need to be this other thing. And so I think, I guess, armchair quarterbacking, it's easy to say in hindsight, Snyder planned it all along, but I think so, because of the way things paid off and the way they were presented in Justice League, that was the journey that the characters had to take. They were completely different in many ways from what people expected. And,
having 4 hours to do that story also allows for so much more nuance in the roles
exactly.
too. And that's why I wonder, like, in Batman v Superman, how much maybe had to be cut out of there that might have added the sort of nuance that would have made me more comfortable with the story and the narrative and things like that, and having 4 hours to tell the story is really a whole lot of time to do the things, and make it exactly the thing you want.
Yeah, well, Batman versus Superman had the same thing. They had the theatrical cut and then the extended version, and I agree that the theatrical cut of that was choppy and missing a lot of stuff, and just what they added back for the extended edition was like, man, that makes it a much better movie. And I still wondered too what else they didn't let Snyder put in there that might have even improved it more. So this would, I would say, kind of, wrapping things up here, this is kind of a more is better.
Yes, so, I would agree. I was not tired at all in the 4 hour viewings of this. I split it up, and I was looking forward that second day to, all day, sort of like, I can't wait to actually watch the rest of that movie. I can't believe I'm feeling this way.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so then I guess we'll say that it gets 2 thumbs up from both of us. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
You know, and
Right.
I'm as shocked as anyone by the fact that I enjoyed it as much as I did, and you know, I'm feeling sort of the same way you are. You know, after watching what I did of it, I would have loved to see the rest of that play out and see how it plays out, because some of those shots were just so gorgeous. You know,
Yes.
the Dark Side and Steppenwolf and many of the things that they did there. They're beautiful, and I would have liked to have seen that fully realized.
Awesome. Well, I think over the next few weeks, I know Chris and I will probably talk about this some more. We may have to have you back at some point to talk about it again once it's kind of settled in, and maybe some of us have viewed it a few more times, because, you know, things always change over time. So I'll be kind of curious to see if after we all watch it, you know, a couple more times. It's kind of hard to ask of a 4-hour movie, but after we've, you know, watched it some more, thought about it some more, to see what we think of it down the road. So maybe we'll have to have you back to talk about this specifically. But of course, we'll have you back anytime, because it's always a joy to talk to you.
It is great to be on the show. I always enjoy talking with you guys.
Fantastic. Well, so, you know, you can find the Flickcast. I always feel weird when we say this. You can find the Flickcast at Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and all that. But if you're, you know, listening to this, you probably have already found it. But, you know, feel free to tell your friends where they can find our show. And it's pretty much wherever podcasts are available. You can also find, you know, Chris and I online. Chris is at Chris U. I'm at What Joe Writes. Rick, what's your handle?
I am at Rick Marshall.
Cool. So, yeah, definitely go find Rick. We'll get links to your articles, especially about Zack Snyder's Justice League, up with this podcast, so people can go read that. But if you want to hate on Rick, we're going to have problems. So please stop doing that.
Yes, please.
I can't understand that. Anyway. So thanks for listening, everybody, for the Flickcast. I am Joe Dilworth.
And I'm Rick Marshall.
And he's Rick Marshall. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next week.